It actually came about originally with my mother's death on Good Friday several years ago. We had a cremation for her, and then my mother's ashes sat for quite a while in the back of the shed because we didn't know what to do with them. And so in the end, my sister and I took my mother's ashes down onto Blackpool Beach and we decided to scatter her. Unfortunately, we picked downwind and half the ashes ended up all over my sister. So I thought to myself, there's got to be something more dignified than this. So I started looking into what to do with people's ashes. First of all, I found out there were over 250,000 sets of ashes unclaimed in this country, which is a phenomenal figure. And what was the reason behind that? The main reason behind that was people don't know what to do with the ashes. A lot of people like to scatter them. However, I found out the National Trust and most national parks have now banned the scattering of ashes. So I then looked, what do we do? And obviously there are different options. People can have them turned into glass and so on. But what I had heard a lot was that a lot of people want to return to nature. So the whole basis of the eternity tree is returning somebody to nature. In that sense then, it was how are we going to do that? Because I found out that ashes are actually incredibly alkaline. They actually have a pH of 11.8 on the scale. So we first of all had to look at how we were going to neutralise those ashes. As we were doing that, we found out that actually 40% of the ashes are incredibly good for a tree to grow. So we looked at how we could then neutralise half the ashes and keep the other half and turn the whole thing into a compost. And our eternity seed, which is the acorn-shaped urn that you will end up with and end up putting the ashes into, is just that. It's the very first, the world's first, bio-neutralising urn, which biodegrades within several months in the ground, turns, as it does, the ashes into a very rich compost capable of being soaked up into specifically grown trees just for that occasion. So now, for the first time, people can actually genuinely return to nature. They can improve the health of this country by increasing the amount of oxygen and increasing the amount of carbon that's sequestered out of the atmosphere. And that's why we also, with every purchase, we plant 5 more trees in national forest and national trusts around the country. Yes, indeed we have. I mean, obviously, with it being people's deaths, we don't publicise particular stories for obvious reasons, but we did receive the most beautiful letter last year from a family whose nana had died and her favourite tree was a cherry blossom, and we actually planted her ashes under a sapling cherry blossom. And in August, September last year, we received the most beautiful letter saying that in fact Grandma had blossomed for the first time and had had the whole family round, sat in the garden next to her and raised a glass to her. And their words were, they actually felt like she hadn't so much passed, but she was still living there with them. And every year they were all going to get together and raise a glass to Grandma. And that made it really worthwhile for us to be running this company. It made us feel like we've achieved something and given something back to people. The industry is changing constantly. Prices of funerals are going up on average £500 a year. 95% of funerals 50 years ago were burials. 97% almost now of funerals end up in cremation these days. So there is a lot of people sat with a lot of loved ones' ashes. But also, a figure that I found most disturbing was that 50% of credit card debt is now down to people paying for funerals. So what's happening is, when the funeral's happening, people haven't got the money to pay for it. So the burden is going on their loved ones to actually pay for the funeral. Now that doesn't sound right with all the stress and all the heartache and all the love that's lost when a death occurs. We looked into the funeral industry, into the funeral plan industry, and we found, yes, there are some very good funeral plans out there, but we wanted to do something different. Obviously, the very nature of the eternity tree is that we're helping people return to nature. But something we found was that if you give your money to somebody for 15 years, the money that those companies can make out of that far outweighs what you're getting back in return. We're working, in fact, with one of the biggest and the best financial institutions in the world, and we discovered that if we take your money to pay for the funeral, and 15 years later, we'd look to, we can in fact actually give you your money back and still give you the funeral you want. That's a pledge that no other financial service in the world is offering at the moment. And as I say, we wanted to do something different. We also, if you refer a friend to the Eternity Funeral Plan, we will also give you an eternity tree for free. So not only if you survive those 15 years do you get your funeral paid for and your money back, but you also get an eternity tree for free. And I think that's something that nobody else in the industry can do. And I think it's something that our customers, by the numbers, by the dozens, are actually jumping on with us and saying, we like that.